Hey there, guys. Micah Curtis here. Thank you so much already, right out of the gate, for coming and listening to this ramble of mine. This is not a planned review whatsoever, which is why the footage is really not edited at all, like Shirt Dude usually does it. Which, by the way, just kind of shows you how much of a boon he really is to this channel, because he has really improved, in my opinion, the way that reviews look and feel. So, if you ever get the chance, if you're in the comments for one of the reviews he works on, if you probably just heard my Pepsi opening, because again, this is going to be off the cuff, give Shirt Dude a thank you anytime you see him, and tell him he did a good job if you think he did. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Castlevania Nocturne. For those of you who don't know, I am a big fan of the original Castlevania Netflix series. I still sing its praises to this day. I enjoyed every season of it. And I really feel like it was some of Warren Ellis's best work. It was a tremendous, tremendous show. Now, the thing is that doing a follow-up to Warren Ellis's work on Castlevania was always going to be difficult because Warren Ellis got canceled. Now, I don't know how true the abuse allegations, quote unquote, were, but regardless, the man apologized. He felt bad about it, and, he tried to make amends. So, the question is, do you believe in forgiveness or not? I do. So, if he wants to be a better man and he realizes he fucked up, forgiveness should be there for him, in my opinion. Now, I'm admittedly biased because Warren Ellis is my favorite writer. He is my biggest inspiration as a writer. You wouldn't have a book like 3 Nights, 4 Days if not for Warren Ellis's work. Now, regardless, the Netflix Castlevania series is pretty well liked, and I think for good reason. Obviously, the writing is really solid, and then, of course, you have great characterization, great voice acting, a great overall plot. It had a lot of soul to it, and even though it was obviously an alternate timeline, they still had enough of the characters from that time period in Castlevania to make it really interesting. Now, if you're somebody who prefers the original timeline and that original universe, okay, that's fine. Well, it hasn't really gone anywhere. Just as a heads up. You can still play Castlevania 3. Last I checked, it's not illegal. Which this is something that I tell people all the time, is that there's no fucking way that things of old get ruined by an adaptation that you don't like. The new Star Wars movies, the sequels, have not ruined Star Wars for me. I can fire up Empire Strikes Back whenever the fuck I want and still have fun with it. So, regardless, I enjoyed the Castlevania series. Now, with this follow-up, what we're getting is we're admittedly going into territory that is going to be kind of tough to touch, because I would say if somebody is a fan of the Belmont clan in Castlevania, you're going to be either a Simon fan or you're going to be a Richter Belmont fan, and I can understand why. I mean, to this day, I still have the "Die, monster, you don't belong in this world" speech completely memorized. So, and I apologize for my stammering and stuff like that, but it's one of those things. Like, a lot of people are fans of Rondo of Blood. A lot of people are fans of Symphony of the Night. So going into that era of Castlevania is always going to be tough to do. So basically what happened is Castlevania Nocturne has a new creator and showrunner in Clive Bradley. Since, again, Warren Ellis got canceled, they're not going to rehire him. Unfortunately, and I'll get to why that's unfortunately here in a minute. Powerhouse Animation Studios returns to do the animation, etc., etc. Sam Dietz is still the director. And there's a couple things I want to address in this. The first part is the question of, was it woke? In a word, no. No, it's not. And here's something that I need to say. You're going to go on Twitter and you're going to see things taken out of context. You're going to see a woman saying the phrase, to abandon the white man's God. You're going to see something along those lines of a character saying to tear the church down. Now, what is the context of that scenario? Well, the first one is a pagan saying that. Specifically, a pagan following a paganistic African religion. She is an African pagan mage. So why would an African pagan mage, which by the way is involved in the process of getting rid of a bunch of plantation owners in the Caribbean, say anything positive about anybody with pale skin? In context, it wouldn't make any sense. That's how they would see the world. So in context, it makes sense. Now, in regards to tearing the church down brick by brick, okay, well, where does that come from? Well, Maria Renard, in this particular timeline, is a supporter of the French Revolution. If you don't know much about the French Revolution, they were not big fans of the church, folks. Like, not at all. They told people they needed to swear fealty to the state. Well, if you're a religious person, you're going to not want to swear fealty to the state because the state is not God. And they make mention in the storyline that there are preachers that are willfully going to the guillotine instead, becoming martyrs. So what we have in front of us is characters of different backgrounds with different perspectives. And by the way, not everything that they have put in place for these characters is shown as a positive. Maria Renard is not portrayed, at least not in my opinion, as a 100% moral character. She's a brat in a lot of ways, and utterly naive about the terrible things that the French Revolution is doing. She is an idealist that seems to think that what is coming is absolute freedom. Well, freedom from what? That's the question. For those who don't know, historically speaking, the French Revolution is one of the most debated revolutions throughout time. Some people would even argue that there are political problems in France still to this day that stem from all the way back in the French Revolution and the very way that the French government was set up. But regardless, that's a whole completely different discussion and not really relevant to Castlevania. The ultimate thing is it woke? No, it's not. In context, the things that are being said make sense. Not to mention, this is not a show about white people versus the diversity crew. There are black vampires in this. There are Mexican vampires in this, so on and so forth. On top of vampires that are plantation owners, that are aristocrats. But I feel like a lot of these complaints, when you actually think about them, the response is just shocked Pikachu face. Oh, you're telling me that vampires, evil creatures who like to eat humans, wouldn't be against the idea of keeping human beings as property? Shocked Pikachu face. You're telling me that vampires who idolize the ideas of controlling a populace and lording over them, that they've been feudal lords for hundreds of years in the Castlevania timeline, that they're going to be aristocrats? Shocked Pikachu face. In context, which, by the way, context is king, it makes sense for this to happen. It makes absolute sense. So, given the time period, this is being done in the late 1700s, after the American Revolution. Which, by the way, is referenced as a positive more than once in the series. During this time period, slavery has not been abolished. Really, I don't even know if anywhere at this point, except for a couple of states in the founding of the United States. In fact, by 1790-something, I think only 3 had completely stated that they would either abolish it or would not allow the slave trade in their state. I want to say it was Vermont and two others. I'm forgetting, but there's already divides going on within the country at that point that would lead up to the Civil War. So, given the time period what it's in, how the fuck is that woke? And at that point, when you strip away all of the complaints with context, what are you left with? You're angry about a black character existing in the context that a black character would have to exist. Or you're complaining about a gay character existing where a gay character would exist. So on and so forth. And that's getting into a point of me wondering what the fuck the problem is. Is the problem that there are characters of a background that you don't like that exist in this fiction? Well then, I'm going to just advise for you to fuck off and watch something else that agrees with your ideas. But I'm not going to sit here and say that this is some sort of intersectionality buffet when it's not. So don't come crying woke to me if you can't define intersectionality or even spell it. Because that's sort of where we're at, and I'm getting sick of that being used as a criticism. You need to show me why it is this thing. I have watched this entire series front to back, took notes, paid attention, and lo and behold, it's not what you claimed it to be. And this is not the first time this year that this has happened with a piece of media. And I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm getting fucking sick of it. The culture war has ruined people's brains at this point, and I just don't fucking care. I'm going to judge these series on their own merits. The video games, the shows, the everything that I review, they're going to get judged on their merits. Because, to be honest with you, yeah, intersectionality is not doing good things for our culture. At the same time, I am not a politician. I am a critic when it comes to this YouTube channel. And as a critic, and also as a creator, my concern is whether or not it's good. And one thing I have found is that if you focus too much on the political, the series falters. So, at the end of the day, the wokeness isn't the problem. The wokeness, when it happens, is a catalyst for bad writing. And bad writing is the enemy of good fiction. So, enough about politics. I've said everything that I want to say about it. Let's actually talk about the objective parts. Is this a good series? Eh. Eh. 6.5 out of 10. Like, it's all right. It's okay. And that's the thing, is like it's not, in my opinion, worth making a stink over. Like, when I think of bad writing, this doesn't qualify. What we have in this is we have a main cast that is largely made up of 18-year-olds. Richter Belmont's around 18 years old. Maria Renard, I think, is like 14. Annette is, I want to say 18, 19 years old. Maybe 20. Edward, the opera singer, he's really young too. So these young characters act like young characters. They haven't had the life experiences that Sypha and Trevor and Alucard had at that point. They hadn't gone through a lot of the same things. The one who, in my opinion, they probably wanted to steal the show was Annette, and we will get to her in a second. But ultimately, throughout a lot of this, you have younger people acting like younger people. I remember somebody saying, like, oh, some of this dialogue seems like they're acting like teenagers. Gee, teenagers talking like teenagers? Shocked Pikachu face. I'm going to be doing that a lot lately, I think. But when it comes right down to it, one thing I will freely admit is that the problems with some of these characters aren't their ages. The problem is that a couple of them are just mean-spirited people. For example, Maria Renard is a bitch. She is a overly zealous bitch. And I don't really know if you're supposed to like her. I don't think you are, but I could be wrong about that. She is all in on the French Revolution. She believes in all of it. And the problem that comes with that is all of the complications of the French Revolution, which I had mentioned earlier. Now, here's the thing. This is not a world where everything is black and white. In fact, I would say that some of the forces that are on the opposing side of the French Revolution in this, namely the church, are actually played off as fairly sympathetic. Because, again, there's no freedom of religion. Or at least the way that the revolutionaries are talking, if you don't swear fealty to the state above a deity that you worship. Well, a Christian, they're going to either choose one of two things. They're either going to submit, which Christians have done before, or they're going to be fed to the proverbial lions, which is what comes into the character of Abbot Emmanuel, who is portrayed very well by Richard Dormer. Now, for those of you who don't know who Richard Dormer is, he was the leader of the Brotherhood Without Banners in Game of Thrones. He's a pretty good actor. I really liked him in this. And Abbot Emmanuel is easily the most complicated character in the entire show. He is a man that is honestly put in one of the hardest situations that you could be put in, and he admittedly makes a mistake, and he gets in over his head, and you feel horrible for him, because this is a guy who cares and loves his community. He loves the church, and he loves God, but he's lost because he's been put with an impossible decision: bow before man, or continue to bow before God, whom you love and who has given you purpose, and face the guillotine, face your end. It's not an easy decision. I hear a lot. This is something that I actually told my dad annoyed me about Christians back in the day. This is a little personal story. But it also goes into why this character, I think, is so relatable for people of faith. Or he will be, in my opinion, is there's a lot of people of faith out there that act like they would just dive into martyrdom tomorrow. That they would be, if somebody put a gun to their head and said, renounce God, that they would take the bullet. No, they wouldn't. There's a lot of people who would renounce God immediately. Peter acted like he didn't know who Christ was 3 times. Simon Peter, who loved Jesus, one of the 12 disciples, denied Christ 3 times. So it's not like religious people don't lose faith under stress or under the fear of death. And that's what makes Abbot Emmanuel feel so real in a lot of ways. It's like, how do you go through this? And you learn that his ties to the main characters, specifically to Maria Renard and to Tara Renard, her mother, like it just puts him in a situation where you're just sitting there like, man, I feel so bad for this guy. The same kind of goes for Richter Belmont, because Richter Belmont has a personal tragedy and a personal connection to the vampires that is not resolved as it goes on. And he is still struggling with an element of being a vampire hunter, what it means to be a Belmont. And he really hasn't had the guidance that he needs, and it shows as the series goes on, and he is essentially discovering parts of himself as the series continues to go. And as we get further on, he starts to come into his own as the Richter Belmont that we know and love. One thing I actually dig is that they have it that it's it's very relevant that the Belnades magic, the speaker magic, is now passed on through the Belmonts as well. Interesting way, because there's a couple times that Richter uses the magic and it comes across like the item crashes from Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. He actually uses one in, I want to say, episode 6? Yeah, episode 6. And it's fucking cool. And they also use the song Bloodlines in that very episode. I would say, like, the two best episodes are episode 6 and episode 8, the final episode. And I'll get to those in a second when we talk spoilers. But I want to keep talking about the characters. Another one, like, I have to mention, Annette is very unlikable. She is the escaped slave girl. And she has a very sympathetic past, obviously. Like, anybody who is familiarized with what the lives of slaves in the 1700s was like will understand why it was a horrifying place to be. And then on top of that, the guy who owns your plantation's a fucking vampire. That is a wild thing. I think that what makes her unlikable is partially because her mistress, of course, does the whole fuck Christianity thing. Oddly enough, the two characters that say basically fuck Christianity in this story are the ones that are the least likable ones because they're really bitchy. At one point, ironically, she has to invoke God to kill a vampire by using the cross. So I don't know if the writer really realized that he was kind of making her a hypocrite in that moment. But regardless, the characters are kind of a mixed bag. There's ones that are really likable. Like I said, Richter is good. Tara Renard is good too, who is Maria's mother. She's a really good character. Abbot Emanuel's good. Mizrak, who is a knight serving under the abbot, is a good character. And then there's a couple of hidden characters, we'll say. Ian Glenn, who was in Game of Thrones as well, plays another member of the Belmont family. I won't spoil who. But he, of course, plays a role in one episode of the series. I have a feeling he will probably return in the second season, and he does a good job. And then I think they spoiled it. Alucard does come back in this, and of course, dude, James Callis' Alucard is fantastic. So, and then the villains are good too, like for the role that they play. But ultimately, like, the villain that steals the show is going to be Abbot Emanuel. But I've said enough as it is. I think that the problem is that with having characters that are bitchy and unlikable in this, you understand why they're bitchy and unlikable, because they are children, basically. But that doesn't stop them from being bitchy and unlikable, and admittedly, they kind of drag things down a little bit. So if the writer really wants them to come across as a little bit more relatable, how this series ended needs to be humbling for those characters specifically. I hope that he realizes that, because a writer worth his salt would. Another thing worth mentioning is, like, the world build is solid. Like, all of the things that are going on are solid. It doesn't feel black and white. Like I said, the French Revolution is not portrayed, at least in my opinion, like a 100% a good thing. Like, there are obviously problems here. If there weren't, a man of God wouldn't think about doing what he's doing and allying himself with vampires. So yeah, that's something to consider. But on top of that, there are some other notes that I had here that I wanted to talk about before I get into spoilers. Let me go through the list. I already mentioned that it's not woke, but I'm going to reiterate, it's not woke. The animation. It's the same as the prior series. It's the same studio working on it. It has the same problems that it did before. I had somebody on Twitter say like that the original series didn't have like problems where it seemed like they were missing frames of animation. No, they've always had that problem since the very first season. It's just the way that they animate things. And by the way, I'm not a fan of it either because it does come across as stiff or that you're missing things. And it feels like they're anticipating that your brain is going to fill in the missing gaps. And it doesn't really work. So while the fights are choreographed fairly well in the sense of like how they flow, who dies when, and how people are killed and the effect that it has on you, that's pretty well done. But like the animation could be a lot smoother than it is. So that problem still persists. However, the art design itself is really fucking good. One thing is you will see, of course, some monsters that you've probably seen before in previous Castlevania games, but a lot of the design seemed to take inspiration from Devilman. I'm a huge Devilman mark, so I can't really complain about that. And then the use of music is very good too. Obviously, the fact that they use the track Bloodlines for a very big moment is pretty fucking great. And the cinematography is good too. You know, this is a show. Especially in episode 6, which I've gushed about a lot. This is a show that actually understands when to use a wide shot, because that was a problem that I had with Obi-Wan when I watched it. Is like the first half of that show, they would use these wide shots where the lead character would get lost in the background instead of it evoking a certain emotion. But you know, this kind of follows how wide shots are supposed to be used, where there is a center character, and then you're supposed to get an idea of how they are affecting the world or the world is affecting them. One of the most famous wide shots ever is Griffith holding the Bayonet after they broke him out of prison. You guys know the image I'm talking about when the eclipse is about to start. That is probably the best use of a wide shot in animation when they use it in the anime, and of course in manga when Kentaro Miura used it in the manga. And that, in my opinion, is what you should study if you want to understand the wide shot. And they do it really well in this with some specific spots with Richter. So, but regardless, you know, again, there's problems here. I really feel like some of the hero characters are underdeveloped. I feel like a lot of the more interesting stuff is happening with the villains. I feel like, honestly, the heroes needed a season 1 like the heroes in the original series got, where they had a whole 4 episodes, basically a mini-series, to introduce us to our heroes and give us something for them to do, and then they go fight the bad guy. In this, they're not really given enough breathing room. So when people say that they feel like, you know, Maria and Annette are kind of underdeveloped and needed a bit more time in the oven, I agree completely. Absolutely agree. I really feel like we needed more time with them. I'm gonna be honest, I really, really, really did not like, what's his name? Not Mizrak. Olrox, the Aztec vampire. Zon McLaren, like, I don't know who the voice director was on this, but they need to really put their fucking foot down in regards to wrangling some of these guys. Because some of these people are very good voice actors, and they've got experience. And this isn't anything against Zon McLaren personally, because I don't think he's a bad actor. It's just he sounds so fucking bored in all of this, in points where he shouldn't sound bored. And that's a problem with the voice direction. Oddly enough, like, this is the same problem that that Mortal Kombat games have had in the last 2. You know, is like, you've got Ronda Rousey sounding wooden and stiff. You've got Megan Fox having a lot of the same problems. like she's just reading off of a card. You shouldn't have that issue if you have a voice director. If you've got a competent voice director, you should be able to get people to emote properly. But I don't know. I think maybe there's just a chance that like there's not a lot of good voice directors these days. I don't know. Maybe it's an experience thing. I'm not sure, but it's a problem that needs solving. And yeah, I just think that honestly, a lot of the problem comes from the fact that there were issues in the original series that didn't get fixed, and when your cast of characters isn't as good as they were in the previous series, those issues are going to seem even bigger than they were before. So yeah, like there's some big positives, but it's not really reaching the heights that it could. I really just wish that they had done something to make Annette a lot more likable instead of as bitchy as she is. She's an idiot. Like that's one thing that at least is consistent with her, is she's fucking stupid. I mean, she actually gets somebody killed because she's a fucking rageful idiot. And then Maria Renard is an idiot too, and a brat. But I think that that's supposed to be the way she is. So, hopefully, again, something will happen that will allow these characters to develop a bit more, because they didn't really develop a lot in this, and something needs to happen, or else they're just going to be the bitchy characters and nobody's going to like them. And it's just like, people are going to just be clamoring for them to get off the fucking screen. No characters had that problem in the last Castlevania series at all. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the spoiler section of this. And I know I've been going on for a half hour, but I really wanted to go in depth in this because I am a big Castlevania fan. Not just of the animated series, but of the video games too. So let's talk about the final episode. So the final episode I really, really liked. I thought it was the strongest one, and I really feel like it was the right decision to make. Because I feel like, obviously, if you end it now, you know, you're not going to make as much money, let's be honest. But on top of that, I really feel like you're building up this villain in Elizabeth, who is supposed to be based on Elizabeth Bathory, which is who her character in the video games is based on. So, by the way, it's pronounced Elizabeth, not, and I think it's supposed to be Elizabeth Bathory, not Bradley. But so let's just call her Elizabeth Bathory, just for, ease of conversation. But you've been building her up to be this massive threat, and you don't really see too much of her. You just see that she's evil, and there's not enough really background on her. You just know that she is big and bad and tough, and is essentially meant to kind of be Dracula's successor in a lot of ways, in regards to just being a threat. Now, what I liked about this, and what they did, is basically part of her legend is that she drank the blood of the goddess Sekhmet and took her power. And in doing so, it made her the most powerful vampire on Earth. And there is a cult based around her. And the very idea is that her magic is so powerful she can force an eclipse. And she fucking does it. And it's as horrifying as you think it would be. Vampires are out in the fucking daytime, and that is not good. So, what ends up happening is there is a plan set to where they have to go to the church. And the big gimmick with the priest is that, or the abbot rather, is that he has a machine that allows him to make the demon creatures from the night creatures from the series so far. Just like the other two were able to in the previous games, the ones that were from Curse of Darkness. And so Isaac was one, I forget the name of the other. But a machine that allows him to do that without having the same alchemical skill but rather just knowledge of these magics. I don't know how he got the machine. It's not explained. The idea is it's from hell. And he had a book that allowed him to access that book. And the magics that open it kind of remind you a bit of the magics of Saint Dumas from, I think that was his name, Bill Nighy's character from Castlevania Season 3 and 4. And when it comes to how the whole thing plays out, Elizabeth Bathory is basically, I wouldn't call her a character. I would call her a force of nature. She kind of reminded me of how Griffith was portrayed in the Black Swordsman arc of Berserk, in the sense that just like you couldn't touch her. And it's a scary thought, because it's like Richter Belmont has been killing vampires and night creatures without much trouble up to this point. He's obviously experienced at what he does, even at a young age. He can't fucking touch her. His magic, his consecrated whip, nothing. Can't do shit. So, you know, this is a nightmare on Earth. This has the potential to get just as bad as Wallachia had gotten in Castlevania proper. And it's a scary prospect, and they can't fucking win. And Maria has been presented as a sacrifice to basically show the loyalty of the church, of the abbot and his people to her forces. And in this, there's comparisons to Abraham offering Isaac. And there's this powerful moment where, like beforehand, where the abbot is screaming, like, where is the ram? God did not send a ram. And then they call back to it where Tara looks at him and says, God has sent the ram. Meaning, I will sacrifice myself. I will become a vampire to save our daughter. That's the spoiler, is that Maria is the daughter of the abbot, and Tara, a speaker magician. So it's a tragic scene because Maria, you know, she gets transformed into a vampire. Up to this point, she's this beautiful, pure, kind woman, and who just had already fled this vampire who killed her sister, by the way. And now she is having to do this to save the life of her daughter. And they narrowly escape with their lives. The spell to put the machine that creates the night creatures back in hell fails completely because of the arrival of Elizabeth Bathory. And they narrowly escape. And all of the people that are against Elizabeth have gotten together, but they're on the ropes. They're running out of the town, trying to get some distance, but they can't get away. And the vampire is about to get on top of them and kill them. And then Elizabeth Bathory's number 2, whose name escapes me at the moment, is pierced through the heart by a very long sword. And that very long sword, if you guys know your Castlevania, belongs to none other than Alucard. And reinforcements have arrived, and Alucard is there to save the day and basically says, I hope I'm not too late. And that's the last line of the series. And that last episode was exactly what this show needed to be, honestly. It honestly puts all of the heroes in their place. It shows them as children in an adult's world. And when Alucard shows up, the fact that he takes out this number 2 vampire, this the right hand to Elizabeth Bathory, so easily, kind of gives you the idea of, okay, now we're playing on a different level. Now we're playing on something new. Because this is a world that doesn't even know what Dracula is, and because Annette actually says, who the fuck is Dracula? They don't even know Dracula. They don't even know the most powerful vampire of all time. because they're so far removed from anything like this. It's a great establishing moment of shit just got real. And I really feel like that was the only way you could end it, because if you didn't end it that way, if you ended it with the heroes just kind of winning, the whole thing would have felt very hollow. Now, does that save the series? Not really. It brings it up from a 5 to a 7. You know, it really makes it a lot better because it kind of saves it. I really feel like the first 4 episodes had some good moments, but ultimately, because of a few characters lagging behind, making the hero team less interesting, you had yourself a situation where it really felt like it was relying a lot on how interesting the world was, not how interesting the characters were. And I was more interested in how the whole thing with the church was going to play out in the Abbot than I was anything to do with our team of vampire hunters. And then the vampire hunters started getting interesting again around the 6th episode. And then by the 8th episode comes around, shit gets real. And now we're in a position where these characters are going to have 2 options: grow or die. Now, here's the thing. The inconsistencies in this come from the fact that Warren Ellis is not writing it. And I don't know anything about Clive Bradley as a person, and I don't care, because I don't need to know the pizza maker. I don't need to know the guy who makes the hot dog. I just want the hot dog, to be honest with you. But when it comes to Clive Bradley, he's not as good as Warren Ellis. He's just not. And there's not a lot of writers that are. Warren Ellis is one of the greatest comic book writers of all time. So following him is not easy. Warren Ellis has a better grasp of characterization. Warren Ellis has a better idea of how to make every scene meaningful. Not just to drive the plot forward, but also to drive the characters forward. He is a master of the written word. And Clive Bradley, I know he's won some awards, but, you know, awards don't always mean what you think they mean. And not to mention, he doesn't really have a lot of experience with stories like this. So I don't know if he's out of his depth or if he's just adjusting to a new climate. But ultimately, my general thought is just, you know, this could have been a lot better than it was. It's not bad, and it's not what a lot of people are making it out to be, but there's a lot of problems from the originals that obviously didn't get fixed in regards to the overall style and animation. And because the story isn't as good as the last series, those flaws are going to show. So overall, do I recommend Nocturne? If you're a fan of the original Castlevania timeline and you would rather stick to that, just stick to that. Just replay Rondo, replay Symphony, and you're going to be a happy camper. Just stick to that. If you're interested in a different take on this that has a lot more focus on how the world was in the late 1700s, then you might like it. Did I like it? Again, it was okay. It is a show that exists, which is why this is titled what it is. It's a 7 out of 10. It's got a good ending, but a lot of the other stuff in it could have been a lot better than it was, and I feel like again, it's just a team that, like, the writer is just in over his head. I really feel like they should have grabbed another comic book writer. You know, if you're not going to bring Warren Ellis back, why not have, see if Alan Moore would be interested. I would be very interested to see Alan Moore do Castlevania. I'd be very interested. I'd be interested to see how Garth Ennis did it. You know, that would be kind of cool. I'm a big Garth Ennis fan, especially when he knuckles down and is serious. I mean, his Punisher Max is awesome. Because for those who don't know, not everything he does is like The Boys or Crossed. But my point is, I would have much preferred to see a writer that it has to do more with less on a regular basis come in and do this and make these characters a lot more interesting than they were. because I really just feel like that was the biggest weakness. So if you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe. I imagine some people are going to be pissed off at me. Well, fucking get over it. My opinion's not changing. But if you enjoyed it, of course, like, share, subscribe, let people know it's out there. And then, of course, if you're a comic book fan, like I am, head over to Indiegogo. We've got a lot of really cool options to check out. Human Shield, From the Ashes, the next new book in the Reconstruction universe, is going to be coming up probably in the next couple of months. In fact, probably before that. I want to get this thing launched end of this month, beginning of next month. We're working towards that as of right now. And then, of course, the St. Peregrine Dark Knight in the Windy City is also in the works. And, of course, just a quick update on that. The second cover is completely penciled. And then I've got Armand working on the colors as we speak. The original cover is done. We will debut those when we're ready. And then also for sale right now, we have 3 Nights, 4 Days, Part 2. If you're a fan of Castlevania, you will like 3 Nights. If you missed out on the first book, there is a tier that will get you that as well. And then, of course, finally, the novella that I wrote, American Monsters, The Genesis of Project Lazarus. Again, if you like horror, if you like Castlevania, you will like this. It is a little bit more comic booky. It's obviously based in a superhero universe, but it is a novel that kind of has a bit of sci-fi Lovecraft, as I like to call it. So on that note, guys, thanks for listening to this long-ass ramble. My name is Micah Curtis, your favorite vanilla gorilla. Have yourselves a great rest of your day, even if you disagree with me.